There has been a disturbing escalation of anti Semitic incidents in Canada since Hamas launched an unprecedented surprise attack on Israel on October 7th. According to a report by Jewish advocacy group B'nai B'rith, thousands of anti Jewish hate crimes were documented, including beatings, vandalisms at synagogues, and swastikas painted on the walls of schools. Anti Semitic incidents rose overall by 7% from the previous year, with a shocking 700% increase in violent incidents. Joining us now to discuss this disturbing trend is Kevin Vuong, Member of Parliament for Spadina-Fort, York. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, David.
So, several of these incidents have happened in your riding. Can you explain to us what took place in Spadina-Fort, York?
So we've had, unfortunately, a number of incidents now that have included first targeting a business in my riding for no other reason than the fact that it was owned by Jews. And that was what started initially with harassment of the staff of the business and their customers, escalated a subsequent week to another Jewish-owned business then being vandalized. And we're seeing that now happen, unfortunately, across the streets of Toronto. Just yesterday, there was another small business that was vandalized with graffiti. And these things cost businesses money to be able to remove. Mm-hmm. And the question that I want to pose to anyone who's been doing this and is thinking about doing this is, how does vandalizing a local business, that many of which are still fighting for their survival, help to advance the cause for a just and durable peace in the Middle East?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, and I'm sure a difficult one for those who are committing these criminal acts. On that note of targeting businesses because they are owned by Jewish people, this seems like a drastic escalation because clearly one would assume that there is a difference between the country of Israel and Jewish Canadians. Why do you think those who are carrying out these acts, or even those who are protesting outside of these businesses, fail to make that difference?
So at best, David, I want to believe that they are uninformed and they are ignorant of the fact that people here have nothing to do with what is happening in the Middle East. But, I also ask myself too, when these incidents first started happening, who goes around looking up the ethnicity of the owners of restaurants? Yeah. When my wife and I are looking for a place to eat, we look up the reviews. Is the food good or bad? Yeah. We don't go around looking to see if a restaurant's owned by, a Jewish person or not. And then as I reflect on it, I realize only anti-Semites would do that. And I think it's important that we condemn this each and every single time that it happens.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I mean, just an interesting thought experiment in terms of seeking out businesses or researching businesses to see which businesses are owned by Jews. One thing that I've noticed is that it feels like somewhat of a continuation of the BDS movement, boycott, divest, and sanction, something that has been rather popular on university campuses across Canada. Do you see this as a continuation of the BDS movement in terms of targeting Jewish businesses or businesses with links to Israel?
Unfortunately, I think there is a lot of resemblance between those, what we're seeing now and that movement. And I should share, David, when I was a grad student, I was a member of the student union, the faculty representative for my program. And I had to fight that movement as well when I was a student at U of T. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I had asked my colleagues, fellow students who were advocating for the BDS movement was, have you actually been to the region? Have you actually been to the West Bank? I was in Ramallah, the capital of the Palestinian Authority. Have you spoken to Palestinians? Because when I was there, I had heard from Palestinians who actually, like us, just wanted to be able to live their lives, to work and go to school, raise families and so on. And there were people who I heard from who actually worked at factories, different businesses that ultimately had to close because they were targeted by the BDS movement. And that was a key piece of information that they were uninformed about. And I think the same people who are perpetuating that same spirit to target local businesses in Canada, here in Toronto, that have nothing to do with the conflict in the Middle East are continuing in that ignorance.
And we're back with Member of Parliament Kevin Vuong. I want to ask you a question about the protests that we've seen, because there seems to be a bit of a gray zone in terms of what is legitimate protest and what crosses the line. An example would be "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," a very common chant at these pro-Palestine rallies. When we talk to Jewish Canadians or folks in Israel, they view that as a call for the elimination of Israel entirely. Where do you see that balance between protest and hate speech?
So, I mean, right above my head is our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the freedom of speech that all Canadians enjoy is very important and must be protected. But freedom of speech does not mean you have the freedom to be able to advocate for violence, to incitement of hate, and the chant that you're hearing "From the river to the sea," that is, its roots are with Hamas, a terrorist group. It is commonly used by Hamas terrorists. And so I think people need to understand what they're, especially for those who believe in human rights, that believe that all lives should be protected, who might be at any number of different rallies, need to understand that if they take part in these chants, what it really means and calls for.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy where it could be intentional and nefarious, or it could be ignorance and innocent, where someone is chanting something, not truly understanding the context. I want to shift gears in terms of the conflict itself. There are ongoing calls for a ceasefire from various world leaders, from provincial leaders. I'm curious to know where you stand on the question of a ceasefire.
That's a good question, David, and bless you. I think when it comes to a ceasefire, I think everyone wants to see innocent lives be protected, for everyone to be safe. What I think is important for a ceasefire to be possible is the release of the over 200 hostages that are still being held, innocent children, grandparents, babies. If we take a step back and let's remove kind of Israel and Palestine from it for a moment, and what if it was Canada that had over 1,200 of our citizens murdered and over 200 Canadians being held hostage? I don't think anyone would call for Canada to not go in and rescue our people. And so this double standard that I think we're hearing perpetuated is immensely unfair, and I think has its roots in anti-Semitism, because what any other country would be expected to do, for some reason Israel is not allowed to do.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think it could be argued that collectively we would not have that expectation of another country in similar circumstances. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and Benjamin Netanyahu appeared to have exchanged barbs last night on social media. Trudeau expressing that the Israeli government needs to carry forth their action with extreme restraint. Benjamin Netanyahu essentially responding, saying that they are. How do we balance the objectives of wanting Israel to eliminate Hamas with the need to protect civilian lives?
I mean, first and foremost, David, I think everyone wants to ensure that innocent lives are protected, that everyone is safe, that people have whatever it is that they need to be able to live their lives, the food, the water, all of that.
Mhm.
And I think what we're seeing is that there are so many different groups and different opinions, and in a time where there is a lot of misinformation, so people who are well intentioned, who believe in the cause for peace and protecting innocent lives, sharing things that might be put out there as intentional disinformation by bad actors. So I think we need
Yeah.
to be cognizant of that. At the end of the day, for me, I, I think I recognize that there's only so much that Canada can do in the Middle East.
Of
I
course.
know there has been resources put forward to support innocent people. My priority is keeping Canadians safe here in
Yes.
our city and our country.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, David.